going to bring Kim Stevens back to the mic. Kim is going to set the stage for the next couple of sessions. That's going to take us through the rest of the afternoon. We've got a couple more opportunities in which we're hoping and expecting to hear from the audience. And with that, we're going to get right into things. Kim?
Thank you, Richard. As part of the role of the narrator is to be the dot connector and make sure that we keep on target in terms of the themes we're trying to develop. And, at the lunch break, Rich and I were reflecting in terms of how do we maybe capture a few points regarding the morning session. I thought maybe the first way to do that is just actually refer back to our roadmap. And remind you the fact that today is the Sustainable Stream Restoration Day. That's what you were talking about during the town hall. And tomorrow is the restorative land development. And I guess one way to look at the objectives is that yes, there was discussion of what's wrong, but also we're trying to also set the stage for why we actually are making progress. And that the future is optimistic. It's not all negative. And so keep that perspective in mind that tomorrow is going to be a totally different kind of pace in terms of the subject matter. And again, reflecting on some of our the points that came out of the discussion today, and think right back to when Mayor Maine made his reference to the changing climate. And doesn't that seem like a long time ago that he was here? I mean, that's how things feel when you're in these days. It's very intense. And you've heard a couple of references today to the new normal. And I think this quotable quote from Bob Sandford, for those of you who were here last year, Bob did the keynote. And last September, I worked with Bob in terms of developing a storyline, which for a speech he gave at the Asset Management BC conference, which Wally organized, as he always does. And think back to last summer. What do you recall about last summer? A forest fire, right? When it was. I'm good? Okay. Week after week of smoke. And the smoke extended right across from British Columbia to the prairies, and California was on fire. And Bob crafted this quote saying, after he talked, he was talking to all the prominent scientists, and the belief was, last year we crossed the threshold. But even though we've crossed this threshold because things are different, you have to be optimistic that it's not the end of the world. It's just the beginning of another. So that's the mindset you have to have. And that's why it was so significant having Bill Derry in this morning's keynote reflect on really almost 50 years. When you think back to graduating, in the early 70s, and here it is almost 2020. So been there, done it, and all that kind of stuff. So keep that in mind. And one of the other things, I love Bob Sandford because every time we have him on the program, or I'm dealing with Bob, he always comes up with a gem, kind of gem that an audience can remember. And this one was actually from 2 years ago in terms of, did you know that the water holding capacity of the Earth's atmosphere increases by 7% per 1 degree Celsius? First of all, how do you remember Bob saying that a couple of years ago? But it becomes significant because what Bob was really framing a couple of years ago was the importance of the atmospheric rivers. So I think it was Vaughn, was it Vaughn who made reference to the Pineapple Express? One of the speakers this morning referenced the Pineapple Express, and the fact that, in recent years when we get hammered by the Pineapple Express, we really get hammered by them when it's wet. And that's why, I was on, before the provincial election, I was part of the Climate Action Plan update on one of the working groups, and just have the group that I was on was predominantly people who Their day jobs were, I guess, how would I describe it? They were worried more about buildings and stuff. And we're not, I think Manny and Shaw, you were in the same group. What was our group called? Anyway, you remember that the whole point being of this slide is that, you know, it doesn't matter whether your building is platinum or gold, if we're being hammered by something which is bigger. And so, you know, where do you put your energy? So that's an important concept to keep in mind. Because what we're seeing is more of this, right? Accordingly, December 2014. You can have any number of communities. So, one of our guiding messages for this whole series of approaches, that what happens on the land matters to streams. It's a very simple concept. But, you know, as a water guy, you know, a person whose career has been in water, and I graduated in '73, so you can figure out how old I am, and the fact that even in the water community, there's traditionally been this disconnect between water and land. You have to keep reminding people by saying, no, it's your land ethic that drives what happens to water. Because if you've got if your land ethic is not right, then the consequences are felt in the stream. And our new normal, floods and droughts. I can tell you the year for me, which really defines the beginning of the new normal, 2015. So here we are in 2019. We are now into year 5 of what is the new normal. Because 2015, cast your minds back how critical it was. Think of that graph that Vaughn showed where he highlighted 2015. And I can remember the conversations that I was having with folks in July of 2015, whether it was here in the RDN or in the Comox Valley or in Metro Vancouver, where water managers were saying, my God, we cannot make it through to October or to November. Because, as somebody who was trained in hydrology, we used to do the theoretical 5-month dry weather period in British Columbia, because it never happened. Realistically, yes, we did an analysis for 5 months, but realistically, it could never be more than 3 months. And so in 2015, we were on the verge of hitting 6 months without rain. And we were so lucky, in retrospect, that in late August, there was a few days of rain and reservoirs began to replenish, and we made it through. I think the other part about 2015, which really struck me, was that memories are short, and people forget very quickly because, of course, by October it was raining. And so it was a bit of a surprise to me that when CBC did their annual, what's the top story of 2015, that it was the drought. And so I was asked by CBC to do a whole series of interviews. One morning I was at CBC Studios, and I did radio interviews with every region in British Columbia throughout their network, and then on TV that night. So the aha for me was not that the drought was, the aha for me was that the public consciousness being affected that much that in December they voted the drought as the story of the year. Reference was made earlier today to the hard work of hope. That was the topic that Bob Sandford delivered a year ago. The hard work of hope in a changing climate, and the question I pose is, will we adapt? Will we adapt? That's the question, right? Think back to their other comment by or quote from Bob Sandford. Yes, the world is changing. It's not the end of the world. It's the beginning of a new world. And I think you might have gathered by my remarks at the closing of the first module that I'm a cheerleader because Graham Bethel is here. Where's Graham Bethel? Saw him earlier. Where are you, Graham? Anyway, wherever he was, many years ago, Graham Bethel said to me, for some people the glass is half empty, and for some other people the glass is half empty. But he said, for you, Kim, the glass is half full and the water level is rising. He meant that in a very positive sense. So yes, we have the knowledge, we have the tools. We can restore balance to the water cycle, especially within the urban environment where we've really messed it up. Can we? Will we? Oh, of course we can. But we have to recognize where we need to make the changes. So a hard work of hope in a changing climate. Will we adapt? Oh yes, but only if civil engineers urban planners, and decision makers truly change their mindsets and make restorative land development their #1 priority and actually reconnect hydrology and ecology. Reconnect hydrology and ecology. That's a critical phrase because we spent the last half century disconnecting the two. And until we have that basic understanding, that's part of what we're trying to do through these 2 days. Yeah, it's not just have a town hall session for the sake of having a town hall session. Well, we don't want to present at you. We want to interact with you, but we also want to pass on some knowledge and some training and some education, build some capacity, so that this group. That's why this morning I mentioned that breakdown of the audience: 40% stewardship, 35% local government. The other 25% kind of a mixed bag. It's a diverse group. The educational challenge over these 2 days is to ensure that we give everybody this common understanding so that you actually come out of here with a common language, and especially with the stewardship sector, and think about some of the comments and how to turn what may be seen as negative comments into positive outcomes. You need to be able to ask the right questions. And Zoanne Morton, when she did the co-keynote last year at Nanaimo, made the point about the stewardship sector that you had to understand, you had to know the facts, because if you are giving out the wrong information, you're only hurting your own credibility. So we're hoping that we can actually help people today. As I reflect on my career, and it's easy to say that the legacy of past community planning and infrastructure servicing practices is floods and droughts, right? Because we have disturbed the natural balance of watersheds, especially the urban areas. My career has been defined by floods and droughts. And it was the classical thing, you have a drought in one decade, and you do a report, and you have a solution, and it goes up on a bookshelf, and then later in that decade, you have a major flood, and you do the report and the solutions, and it goes up on the bookshelf, and the next decade it starts again. Some people call that the hydrological cycle, right? But it defines your career a lot. A lot of people want resource engineering. And Bill, that's kind of like your story of your career too, right? I think a turning point the last 5 years really has become that we finally have the language that can get through to people in terms of, it's all about the money, right? It's all about the money. And I look over at Molly Wells and Asset Manager BC, and that's kind of the key part, because getting people to understand simple concepts like level of service, the life cycle implications and impacts of the actions we do, that for creek sheds, watersheds, the consequences don't show up for decades. But there always is a cost, right? So in terms of, always the arguments for, a development and development cost charges, but over time, we're in a situation now where all local governments are well aware of what's... Well, am I allowed to use the word infrastructure deficit? No. We don't really talk about infrastructure deficit, we talk about the infrastructure liability, right? Because that's what we've incurred over time. So I always say to boards and councils, if we cannot afford to replace our core infrastructure, water, sewer, roads, why the heck are you taking on an unfunded liability called drainage? Let's bring it back to its original word, drainage, right? And how we remove water from the land and the consequences we have. And yet, you have the opportunity to turn things around if you go back to the source. And so I guess it was, Bill was with our work, right? I remember going on the walkabouts with the city of Surrey staff in the late 90s and thinking that, our interest was in the potential for redevelopment, because in British Columbia, when you're constrained by the mountains, the water, the US border, and the agricultural land reserve, you have no choice but to densify and redevelop it. So redevelopment was given the opportunity to get it right the second time. Well, we're about 20 years into having the opportunity to get it right, and so while we're making progress, we've had an awful lot of missed opportunities. That's really how I would characterize the last 20 years. We knew what we needed to do in the late 90s. People in some places have done it, but we haven't done enough of it. So to bring it back to the basics, which is really setting the stage for Neil and Sylvia, to make better decisions, we first must understand how rainwater reaches a stream. And believe it or not that many people really understand it, even amongst my fellow engineers. Because only then, when you have the basic understanding of what happens when that raindrop comes down from the cloud and how it eventually reaches the stream, will you be able to do the things we need to do to reconnect hydrology and ecology, and in so doing, go back to the future. I'm giving you some basic language, some basic concepts. Standard engineering practice only considers surface runoff and analyses. Yet the flow of water has three pathways. And you heard references this morning to stripping away the interflow zone and sealing over the landscape so you can't recharge the groundwater. And that's because even if people understood that there are three pathways, they don't necessarily understand the time concept. That's why I really like when Gilles talks about one water. It's one water. It's how that one water reaches it. But you have to think in terms of the three components: the surface runoff, which could be from minutes to hours; the interflow, that shallow zone, that's from days to seasons; and deep groundwater, well, that's from years to decades or more. So you've got to have those three time frames in your mind and think about what you're doing when you're disturbing that balance and what it means in terms of time. It all comes down to, in the urban environment, when streams erode, there is more volume at higher rates over longer periods of time. And that's something that people didn't begin to understand until the 1990s, really. And to put it in perspective for you, here's the water balance by distribution by region. And look at for British Columbia. Interflow, especially here in the south coast, it's 60% of the total annual volume is interflow. That's that strip, right? That's the strip that historically we peeled off, slapped the turf down, and wondered why we had to pour the water on to maintain a green lawn. And that's the legacy that we're dealing with in terms of, our practices overlooked, ignored, or eliminated interflow. And sort of, as I think back, one thought comes to mind. When we did the guidebook, Peter Law, in his former life as Minister of the Environment, was the chair of the Intergovernmental Committee that was responsible for developing the guidebook for British Columbia. I was the project manager and the prime principal author. And when we first released the guidebook in 2002, we actually had people talking about interflow and the importance of interflow. And I tell you that within a matter of years, the word interflow had dropped out of the language again. So you got to keep reminding people. Again, trying to leave you with simple things, simple visuals, what the stream sees at one instant in time. This is on the back page of your agenda, so it's a takeaway for you. But it gives you that sense of when you hear my colleagues, fellow engineers, tossing out terms like the 100-year, the 2-year, and the average flood, give you a sense of what that means in terms of water levels. But just as important is the base flow, right? And that what's being sustained by interflow and aquifer discharges. That's what you're seeing a lot of the time of the year. And it's been great that we've had this month of really nice weather, but we're going to pay for it because it just means everything's drying up sooner. But my takeaway on this slide is that we tend to think of things as a cross-section, like an engineering perspective, or a point in time. If you remember nothing else from what I'm saying right now, is that the complete story of what's happening when you see that cross-section, you see that reference to the 100-year, the 2-year, think of a video or a movie. It's dynamic, right? It's changing. And if you're subjecting your stream to a flow rate that it hasn't experienced and it's being subjected to that for a longer period of time, you're going to erode your creek channel. It's one of your takeaways. Make sure you read that last page, because where's Nick? Over there. Because it was almost like a filler space, it wasn't Nick. And then Nick said, well, we got to add this and add that. And so in the end, we've got the complete story of what you need to understand about flow on one page. Why a workshop within a symposium? We thought long and hard about our program. We didn't, I mentioned this morning, we did not want to be in the trap of convention thing where you get used to coming to a bunch of lectures, and so we blocked out the afternoon. So a lot of the stuff I've touched on, and people touched on today, Neil and Sylvia, are going to do that mini workshop over the next hour and a half. I'm sorry, I'm still over your time, but and why it's so important that Neil is here is because Neil is leading a provincial government program to train community stewards to undertake stream flow data collection in small streams, and the 40-plus people who attended yesterday's workshop are now understand the significance. Nick, I just got to have this commercial for you, because after, 33 years in DFO, and you're going to do the closing reflections, and you're going to kind of connect the dots back to what Bill said this morning, because as Nick has said to me so many times, we knew this stuff 30 years ago, but people are rediscovering what we knew, and yet we've lost 30 years of actually being able to do it now on a larger scale. So reconnect hydrology and ecology, focus on the root causes, integrate restorative solutions. That sets the scene for tonight, when storm, and I'm responsible for not having flagged it clearly in the agenda today, where people are saying, when is it? Well, it's here at 6:30, doors open, 7 o'clock, you're on deck. And Storm has a lot of great quotes. I want to leave you with this quote from Storm. In my experience, the civil engineering profession has trouble adopting the restorative mindset. The main problems in engineering is all about control and certainty. Urban planners have a similar problem. But living systems, like watersheds and cities, resist control and exhibit surprising behavior when they are healthy. And isn't that what Bill said too?